Hi, welcome back to the Dylan Rounds case. Welcome if you're currently here in the chat. Appreciate it. So last night, just referring back to, it was a bit of an interesting video, a bit of a different style, a challenge night which was set by Weedleby. If you'd like to check that show out, if you missed it, make sure to check the link down below in the pinned comment section. It's kind of random, kind of wild. You might find it fun. If you need to get away from drama, that video will help you. So that aside, today we're going to continue the Dylan Rounds discussion. We're going to be taking a look at the Find Dylan Rounds Facebook page. There was an interesting post on there and a few responses by Candice Cooley. See if we can find any interesting information or any slip-ups, any contradictions as we go along, right? Because I know, like Black Dove and others have said, we look back at things, which I can understand and I have done myself, but whilst trying to prevent any more slip-ups, right? Not from me, but from like how other people have experienced issues in the case. If you just like really clamp down on each upcoming piece of information or response by someone and really analyse it, okay, then you might not have to do it looking back afterwards. You know what I'm saying? Something's presented to you, instead of just briefly looking at it, making sense, then moving on, you fully concentrate on it till everything's been extracted. Possible lies, possible truths, anything. You're just pulling it all out of the bag, right? You don't know what will come out next. And speaking of surprises, shout out to Ellen Berg. Looked like we hit a bit of a big iceberg with a recent super chat by her, so that's very good of her. And also Cleo this morning on a different video, so that's all very good. It's very kind of people to do that. In addition, going to be taking a look at the comments of the, not last video, but the last Dylan Rounds video we did, because Black Dove's, I guess, responded since. Just see if there's anything that needs to be cleared up there, any questions that need answering. And speaking of which, just in advance as acknowledgement, I believe there was a comment directly asking me for my opinion on Dylan Rounds, the current situation, and also my opinion on Kenny Veach. And I can tie both of those into this video, because as you know, I don't always give my opinion, because if I did, you wouldn't be able to create as many videos with all the different point of views, because then it would be biased then, because you only talk about yourself. So that's why I try and leave that out. But, you know, someone wanted like a video, a suggestion where I look at it, so I can do that today, okay? And yeah, if anything else pops up along the way, we will take a look at, we'll look into it. I still need to do a couple of shorter videos in between, and just as a brief explanation behind that, the reason why some of the videos will be short is because it is what it is, as for the title, as for what's being talked about in the video. Some stuff and topics don't need to be dragged out that long. So like when you get the more important things, it's either a short video or a long-ish video but dedicated to a singular analysis of a singular thing. So that's what's probably going to follow next, okay? Because there are other videos and ideas popping up. Don't want it to cloud others. Just do the next one next and then see what happens after that, okay? As for Quinton, just randomly on the spot, someone did leave a comment last night in the chat, I believe, saying Quinton has gone to the dark side elsewhere. Now, you might be a bit confused when you hear about that, but basically what I'm assuming, because that line has been used in the past with other YouTube channels, well, a certain one. So, like how you got Jim Twat and Mr. Impetuous, you know, that double act, that's supposedly where Quinton has gone. I guess one of the viewers must have been watching their stream whenever it was and saw him comment. Who knows? I mean, is it a bad thing? Is it a good thing? Well, you can share your thoughts and opinions down below as we do go along throughout this video in the live chat. Make sure to use it if you want and talk about other things in between. What I would say is, because Quinton has been around listening into all kinds of chats, right? That's how he was able to construct his like timeline of events that have gone on and rumours too. He's been listening into all the live streams and call-ins. I don't know, you know, how long it's taken, because all these live streams added up together from all the different channels probably well over 100 hours, if not more. It's crazy, right? But he's managed to do it. But also being able to access some of these channels and live streams. I remember him saying that he's got a certain list of information or events that needs to still be looked at, but in order to do that, he needs to gain access to certain people's channels, such as the membership. I don't know how he works around that, whether he literally becomes a member for a certain amount of time, so then he can look back through the videos and archive, or he gets gifted it in some way. But yeah, busy doing all kinds of research in the background. I'm sure he'll pop back up again, pop back into the chat. As we know, you get some ghost returning from the past here, so you never know who will show up next, right? So with all that in mind, let's just get into the comments of the last video and look at any important messages and then go from there. Right, so here we are. We've got it arranged from the newest comment. We'll scroll down to the bottom, which is the oldest one, and see what's been said. Tom Evans. I'm sure Tom Evans is often the first one to comment, so he's kind of consistent there. He's responding back to Black Dove saying, I went back and watched Mike King's video on Lucin, Utah. You're right. When he talked about visiting with the homesteaders a mile from Dylan's farm, it left me with a real empty feeling. Interesting. It left me with a lot of questions. My main question is, why didn't Box Elder take the time to interview people in the area? I have no reasonable answers. Do you have any? Okay. So anyone else want to check out Mike King's video, feel free to do so. I'll have a look at some point if possible. If you can't quite find his name, I think in the last video I did, or the video before that, I was looking back at the comments by Black Dove, and Black Dove mentioned the actual like channel name in brackets, but I can't remember it on the spot. What's talks about here? Both yourself and Black Dove do a great job questioning the narrative. Okay. I'm keeping my fingers crossed that with the cadaver dog soon on the ground out there, that answers, and more importantly, Dylan will be found. I guess Mama Down Under is referring to Lance Kelly because of getting a hold of that target money to be able to get the cadaver dog. Black Dove, either the cops don't care or they have an incentive not to care. I don't know which it is. And at this point, I don't know who's really behind Dylan going missing. I do suspect James Brenner did something, but I also suspect that plenty of people in that area have heard. Know firsthand or have a good idea of what went down. There were too many local people who popped out of the woodwork not to think so. Yeah, I mean, I guess that has been a bit of a trend. People you've never heard of before. Maybe the odd local that's not heard of, some other people that have popped in out of nowhere. I mean, you've probably seen it more on those other channels where they do the call-ins and then they say, yeah, this is me from here. And it's like, never heard of you before. I didn't even know you were from there. So it starts getting people to question one another and think, what's this all about? You know, is it genuine people popping up out of nowhere or not? Makes you think. That's just one. Joseph says, hi Tom, have you ever stopped to think that they have enough evidence on Brenner and that they've done enough investigation that there's no one else involved with Dylan missing? They have done the detective work, I'm more than sure. We have to realise that they cannot share this information because it will blow the case against Brenner. It's very simple. This is the thing. With time, it seemed as if there's moments where there's a breakthrough, whether it be internally in the case or discoveries made by people outside of the case, like on YouTube or people calling in. A little bit of hype occurs, some sheep follow to an extent, all positive, whee, and then it just all crumbles on itself, and then it's like, oh, because it ends up being debunked, or it just fades into the darkness, whatever the discovery was, and it's not followed up, or it's not reinforced, and it just dies out. There's been a couple of times within the case internally where it seems like there's been some progress or something's going forth, and then it's been abruptly halted, and then it's like, oh, so, it's just one of those things. The most likely is enough or a decent amount of evidence on Brenner or some kind of case set up to, show that Brenner was responsible. And it's like, well, that's good, yeah. And maybe if they find Dylan as well, that's a big bonus. That's the main, target, and then it's all over and done with. But, and there is a but, whilst it's good getting justice for Dylan, if there are other people out there who have either played a part, played a role, or just at least know something about Brenna or about the disappearance of Dylan or the process of leading up to Dylan's disappearance, and they did nothing or said nothing, although they might not be directly involved because they just sat back, doesn't really make them any better, does it? And you got to think long term in the future, obviously if they're still alive, is that if they can do it now, maybe cover for someone or not help, then what about down the line in the future? If it happens again and again, maybe that time they're directly involved. And if not, maybe they just let it happen once again. So they're not doing any good. They're just allowing more and more suffering to continue on, providing there's others responsible within the Dylan Rouse case. So you can share your thoughts and opinions to what you think, but all I say, and this is my opinion on the spot, is that, yeah, Brenna could get sent down and there's a decent amount of evidence to prove he's responsible, but if there's a chance that there are other people out there responsible in some way or another, whether they've been involved physically or they've just kept quiet, they're no better. And that in the future, if there are any other missing people cases or people dying, they could be responsible once again. And it's just letting them out there in the open to do what they want. It's almost like a Brenna 2.0 from back in 2021, in which Brenna should have been arrested, but it was kind of dragged out. We just have to wait for the things to process and get the timing right, supposedly, do it in an orderly fashion. And then what did it lead to? Another person being hurt, being harmed, such as Dylan. You see, history will repeat itself. That is why it's important that anyone and everyone responsible in the Dylan Rounds disappearance case needs to be, something needs to take place. Just one person, the main one, isn't good enough. Everyone else who's also played a role as well needs to be looked at too. You know what I'm saying? Now, I know there's still a chance that it could just be Brenna and that's it, case closed, but I'm just saying that if there are other people responsible, they need to be looked at as well, because if not, it could lead to more negative outcomes down the line with other people, right? And I don't think people in general, like within the case, are looking that long term ahead, because there's been times, and there's been a pattern with me, when we've looked at, when you look back at previous videos, and I've been, doing the little polls and questions, and I've been saying, I wonder what would happen if Brenna was released. I wonder what would happen if Don Hately returned. I wonder what would happen if they came face to face. I wonder what will happen in the future. I wonder what will happen after Dylan's found. I wonder what will happen when Candice Cooley has finally settled down. Is she going to go after the YouTubers or people that might have gone on the land and stuff and trespassed? There was a lot of what will happen in the future. Right, so that's my pattern. So just like I've said now, what will happen in the future if those responsible are still walking free? Do they do something else? Does someone else get harmed? You never know. And I know Candice Cooley, in her own ways, talked about the future with other families and protecting them and preventing things going wrong, just like how it went wrong for her. So like my polls, my predictions, my questions are kind of like the same theme but a different topic, right? Of what could go wrong in the future and how to avoid it. What does Tom Evans say? Yes, I have given that consideration. I have a short answer. If they have the evidence, why aren't they going through with the prosecution of Brenna? Why would they tear up the loosened pond in the middle of winter? Tom, the odds are less than 30% of getting a conviction for murder without a body. They're on Brenna, they just need the body. Do we have a crime scene? The only solid evidence that I know of are the phone pings if I'm missing something. I think everybody involved is pretty sure with the grain shed, all the evidence has come back. They know everything there is to know except where Dylan's body hidden. Hopefully they'll find him soon. All winter now to put together a plan to search the most likely places, areas they're not going to give up. I mean, once again, key point by Tom, like, they're still tearing things up, they're still searching, which means they're somewhat desperate to find Dylan in order for Brenner to and the case to follow through. As for Candice Cooley, the last interview I heard from her, not the last one but the one before that, which was like maybe a week or two ago, Candice Cooley said it's not too much of an issue. Brenner is where he's at. He's not going anywhere, so we don't need to worry about that. We just need to focus on finding Dylan. I guess that's a positive. I mean, this is the most interesting thing, and I think it would have been a whole different level. Actually, do you know what? I'll probably mention it later on. Or do I mean? No, I'll mention it later on, and I better remember what I'm going to say, because I think the whole scenario would have been completely different if it wasn't for one specific thing, and we'll get into that later because I think it's a key talking point. Oh, Mini-Me joins into the conversation. What does Mini-Me say? She doesn't leave too many comments. She said, I think Brenner played a role in this, and I think because he lived at Grainshed area, it's easiest to blame him for all this, which is a fair point, and call it good. But it's not that cut and dry, and that's why some people want to happen here. Obviously, Chase failed his poly 2. Don never took one. He is very suspect. It was too easy to blame Brenner, and I can see why. But let's not let anyone or the actual murderer get away with this. I feel there's at least 2 more involved, maybe more. Brenner needs to just come clean and what he knows and did, just like Robert has, I'm sure. Okay, so if you're present, Mini-Me, can you answer this? So the bit where you're saying about the polygraph thing, where it says, obviously Chase failed his polygraph too, and Don never took a polygraph test. I thought he did. I thought it was Kurt Wadsworth that has never taken a polygraph test. Is there anyone in the chat right now confused like me? And we might as well highlight it right now because it's the first time I've heard of this, okay? First time I've heard of this. In the past, I was under the impression that Brenner completely failed his polygraph test. I was under the impression that Chase Venstra failed only one question in the polygraph test. Not the whole test, but only one question. I was under the assumption that Robert Aviles and Don Hately both passed their polygraph test, despite Don Hately lying face-to-face to the police at the beginning when giving off leads and false tips into the Pilot Mountain area. Is there anyone else in agreement with me? That's how I've always known it. And, you know, some of you may wonder, why do I repeat myself at times with things like that and other events? It's because I need to keep referring back to it, just in case anyone does correct me if there is like an update. You get what I'm saying? And whilst I have repeated myself quite a few times, no one's corrected me. But indirectly here, this is telling a different story. Don Hately never took a polygraph test. I thought he did, and he passed. Where did you hear this from, Mini-Me? Is this new information? Is this a new development? What's happened? I've never heard of this before. Okay? So hopefully we can highlight and make bold this point right now, what you see on screen, and feel free to talk about it because it's new to me. Okay? Let's carry on. I believe that I agree with what you're saying. Tom didn't question it either, so am I behind? I've just generally not heard of anything since. Mark P. Hey, War. How are you? Long time no hear. Any new news on Kenny? Haven't heard anything for a while. Well, as said, the last video I did was the possible proof that Kenny Veach is alive, at least in 2022, towards the end of the year, as there's like a phone call made from his Facebook account through Facebook Messenger towards Susan Veach, which is a bit odd, right? Who would do that? Makes you think. What do we have here? Louise Haraway says, so what's happened to Ty Corbyn? So his niece, who lives with him and his wife, is not his niece, but his mistress. That's why he was upset when she was drugged allegedly in Saddlesaw Bar. Okay, so once again, this is new information. Well, not information, new rumours to me. Never heard of this before. Ty Corbyn, if you're here right now, what are your thoughts? You know, what's going on here? Anyone else in the chat, know of this event? So, lies, possible that the niece was in fact the mistress. Was the wife okay with that? Did the wife know? What's going on there? Sounds a bit dodgy. Drugging in Saddlesaw Bar, allegedly. I'm sure I've heard about the drugging in Saddlesaw Bar in the past, and it was like a rumour, and it was dispelled of, unless this is yet another event. I mean, there was that time, how many weeks ago was it now? Probably a couple, where Ellen Berg was in the chat and she was bringing up the point about how there was other people out there accusing Ellen Berg of poisoning people in the bar, but then it was directed at Weezer, and then Weezer said, no, I've not been there since, and it's not me responsible. It's not Ellen Berg. Ellen Berg's innocent, but it's been blamed on Ellen that she poisoned people. So maybe that's how all this rumour started. Maybe someone called in, could be Kurt Wadsworth, spreading all kinds of stuff. Maybe in the past, it's been passed around since. Add one thing to another. Oh, that person works in the bar there, and then, oh, that person supposedly was drugged. Oh, tie it all together as one. There we go, boom, done. Maybe that's the concept of how all the BS spreads. So we don't need to get too deep into this point on screen right now, okay? I've not really heard it before properly. Let me know your thoughts though down below. There we go, Black Dove popping in. We might as well read it anyway. Let's just see what he's got to say. Looks like it's to do with aircraft, planes. Whilst I don't doubt that planes have been looking for Dylan, in brackets, Candice said they have, I can be fairly certain that an RC-135 Cobra Ball is not looking for any missing person, because that's not what they're equipped to do. The 4 of them that exist are designed to look at missile launches, pretty much exclusively Beach, King, Air, Pipers and Cessnas, with an ISR packages are much more likely candidates, not a huge 4-jet engine airliner converted to a ballistic missile launch watch plane. I don't doubt that Ellie have looked into the family, but an RC-135 Cobra is not necessary or the right tool for the job. A wiretap warrant, a warrant to search property with people and dogs would be much more effective. I have no personal agenda or reason to be right or side with anyone. When anyone has said something I believe to be incorrect, I've pointed it out, as I've regarding this plane. Whilst well intended, I do believe that a tip about an RC-135 looking for Dylan is implausible to the point of near impossibility. If the military is tasking such a plane for Dylan, then you're talking a huge national security level scandal and not a missing person. RC-135s do fly out of Off-Tut Air Force Base all the time, as do E-4B Mercury planes. They fly all over the country, not sure what they're doing, as most people without top secret clearance wouldn't know. Okay. Also, the argument between Kurt, Don and Brenner is something that I had forgotten about. Maybe we can case start with getting more information on that. Yeah, I mean, it's probably a good point about that, because you think if there's an argument, it's a level of conflict, some kind of misunderstanding, a disagreement, due to the fact that those guys, within the argument against Dylan, supposedly, a 3-on-1, something like that, somewhat near to Dylan's disappearance, does make you think, did it lead up to something, right? If there could be conflict but there can be misunderstandings and people can get verbally and cyber attacked online, just like how some people may have been attacked in the Dylan Rounds community just through disagreement or conflict with someone over words, and it led to that extremity. Then the same can happen in real life, but physically, right? And considering the likes of Brenna, Don, who do have criminal history, Brenna being more aggressive, Kurt being a bit dodgy person and stuff, you know, probably not the best type of people to be around during a high time of conflict, right? You know, if you're going to be, let's say, locked in a room with someone, you definitely don't want to be locked in a room and have a disagreement or falling out with an aggressive individual. It's just a recipe for disaster, right? So whilst Dylan could be out in the open and loose, and it's very vast and open, it's quiet too, no services nearby. When I say services, I mean like police department, fire department, hospital, like really close by. No CCTV cameras, so you haven't got that level of security or safety, right? Because although bad things can happen in the city, in all different types of countries, at least there's a backup of coverage watching over you without you maybe always knowing. So you can get justice that way, whether you're still there to get it or not. But when you're out in the open, it's more anything goes. You got to watch your back, literally. So, I mean, would Dylan have been prepared for the worst out there? Whilst we know he was all about farming and getting on with that, putting that above everything else, working hard, did he ever stop for one moment and think, I need to watch my back? You know, did he have a defensive nature? Did he know self-defense? Did he practice with his gun? You know, did he go to firing ranges? Does anyone know that? What's he like with the gun? Is he a good shot? Does he have a good aim? Is he highly alert? Does he know when to pull out of trouble? Does he get involved in trouble on purpose or by accident? What's the situation with that? Because we might be able to tie all these questions and observations back to like what Tom said about the event between Kurt, Don and Brenna, that if Dylan's caught up in the middle of it all, did it escalate further because of how Dylan acted or what he may have said? Or was it he didn't say much because he didn't have much to say and that could have triggered the other guys? It's one way, it's one area to look at, right? But of course, more needs to be looked at. If there can be like information extracted. Yeah. Black Dove, I think an in-depth analysis of all the early call-ins, old live streams before the YouTube Drama Fest would be a good way to get back on track. It's probably a fair point that by Black Dove. Whilst I think looking back can be confusing, especially if you don't know the current context to compare and contrast, if you do have a fair bit of knowledge like Black Dove does, because he's been quite observant and listening in from almost the beginning all the way through, it might be easier for him. He might be able to be more effective at it. But it's very specific what Black Dove said. The early call-ins and live streams before the YouTube drama, and that does tie in with my observation recently, how I said how when you had all these YouTubers and names and different personalities all together smiling, laughing, joking around when it wasn't as serious, when sides weren't taken, there's a bit more genuine behaviour going on. So people did call in at that time early on, maybe more genuine, not as desperate, not as fake. So looking at those specific videos, that could be quite helpful, useful. As for the Candice Cooley interviews, I guess you can look at really any one of them. I don't think that really changes too much. I mean, obviously the progression in what's talked about changes, but in terms of like worrying about the fakeness and all that, it's not too much of a roadblock in that department. Because whether you believe Candice Cooley is telling the truth or not, she's been kind of consistent with one of them at least, or even just consistent at being inconsistent. It is a thing that But yeah, I just can't read him. I appreciate your humour and your disregard for what people say and think. So that's good of Black Dove to say. Shout out to Black Dove. There were other creators, I'm not one, early on who focused on trying to really figure out what could have happened, as we have very little info. I say could have, since the info released, intentional and unintentional, has left people pointing fingers and coming up with wild theories. I mean, you can get wild theories, but as long as they're labelled as theories and only theories, then it's all good. It's when they start turning into facts or events and portrayed as if it did happen when it's unknown of. Okay? Like, whilst even Candice Cooley has highlighted it, wild theories about Bigfoot sightings, the Sasquatch kidnapping Dylan Rounds, UFO kidnappings. Oh, it's very wild, it's very silly. Yeah, but it's bound to happen. People are going to have imagination, people are going to think outside of the box. Sometimes it actually does work, other times though it doesn't, so you got to acknowledge it. But I'll tell you something, you look back to the Kenny Veach case, the Kenny Veach case had and still has more wild, deeper theories and wild, wacky ideas, more than the Dylan Brown's case. And that's a fact, okay? If you look back, you look into the case, completely different level. So you can at least be positive there and say, well, at least with the Dylan Brown's one, it's not as wild. But to be honest, what I would actually say, wild, wacky theories are actually better in the Dylan Rounds case than several more believable but fake theories turned into facts. You get what I'm saying? When you look at the wild theories, you can just look at them and think, yeah, I'll look into it if I'm interested, but it doesn't seem believable, so I'll avoid it. It's a way of filtering it out. You can look into it out of interest, but you might not get as consumed. So with all these like little mini sub-stories and mini events that have gone on, like a series of them following up to Dylan's disappearance and post-disappearance, you start believing in that stuff because of how it's been worded, how it's been presented by people with time, and you can end up falling in the deep end there and being completely lost, right? That's why if you're able to maintain some form of balance, you can go deep into things at times, whether you know you are or not, and pull yourself back out because you've got that balance. But if you're just listening and are being easily led astray, like how some YouTubers may be doing, that's not going to end well, because it's on a very small scale example, but it's like the long-term damage it can do both to the case and also to the people that listen in. You know, what do they believe then? They start doubting themselves. Candice Cooley, Justin Rounds have said they've doubted themselves throughout the case. Did they do the right things? Are they getting stuff wrong? Do they know what's really the truth or not? They said that the police caused them to double check themselves in a way. So maybe the same can happen within the community too. How maybe YouTubers cause it towards people. Anything else here? Right. Black Dove says, I don't know if it's just not what you do or if you have any angle like a lot of YouTubers, since our only correspondence has been transparent in these comments, but you could interview people and do a live show. I don't like how people picked a faction or created to support and trash others. I never did, and I did get comments like, why do you support JT, Doug, Laura, Tyler, etc., when I never supported or sided with any YouTuber. I was simply frustrated that relevant sounding, maybe it was crap, info was being overlooked in favour of I've heard of that word again, sensationalism. Yeah, I remember hearing that once before. But yeah, I haven't experienced it, but I have seen and heard just viewers going from one channel to another and being called out for doing it. So if you just wanted to listen into a video out of interest, because you wanted a change for once. You wanted a different angle perspective on the case. And maybe the previous channel you were following ends up calling you out, whether it be the creator or the fans from that channel call you out almost like as an outcast. And then, it can lead on to all kinds of harassment and unnecessary action. I don't know why it happens. Maybe people don't like the idea of others walking away. It's like, you're imprisoned with me and you're not going anywhere. Maybe that's the mentality of some within this case. Just have a quick drink. But yeah, you can share your thoughts to what you think. Do you think there are channels out there that want to imprison viewers and not allow them to move about? Because in a way that's almost like controlling behaviour. So as I can say, you get domestic situations, domestic abuse, controlling, psychological factors between people in real life. You're also seeing it on a smaller scale, but online, between different communities and people. So someone wants to branch out elsewhere, almost like not allowed to, and if they are, they're punished for it. It seems very over the top, but then again, with it being a true crime case, and true crime community does hold all kinds of people. Obviously the ones that fantasize about serial killers, and then others that end up just whinging and whining, having a bit of a tone to the voice and attitude as well. Come across all types, right? But let's move on. Some of the most relevant sounding info has been not just overlooked for months, but never got big in the first place. The hugest revelations I've ever heard were on small channels. I did bring them up on streams, but no one seemed to care enough about what sounded like very compelling information brought out by smallish YouTubers who talked to locals who were very near to the area and were within visual distance of Dylan's farm. Does that apply to Mike King? Is he classified as a small YouTube channel? Because if so, and there is a video out there and it mentions a few bits of information, I'll definitely make a video on it and try and cause a bit of noise on it, right? Because if you didn't know already, actually first of all, let me just turn the light on because it's very dark in here. If you didn't know already, when it came to the Kenny Veach case, whilst I did my own videos and stuff about, trying to keep the case alive first of all, but also make sense of everything and clear up any loose ends. At one point when one of the, Kenny's sister-in-law or something reached out, Susan Veach, she had key points and bits of information that needed to be, spread out in terms of the general public. The general public needed to hear about it, but, who can provide a platform and who can, put it out there so people can hear about it? So she reached out to a couple of people. She also reached out to me. Then I did videos, covered the stuff, went on about it, and tried spreading the word. And it got about to an extent, right? It was kind of successful in a way. So the same can happen within the Dylan Brown's case, whether it be one little bit of information, a bit of text, a never seen before image that needs analysing, then I can do that. And even if it doesn't reach out to that many people, if you just keep fucking hammering at it, just pure sadistic repetition, okay, that's unique languaging by me. It can work. Eventually people will hear of it. But yeah, let's carry on. Okay, Dylan's farm. Did I read all that? Brought out by, yeah. Black Dwarf also says, all that being said, I'm quite tired of seeing Dylan's name pop up only to listen to hours of this one hates that one, which gets no information discussed, collaboration or revealed. Maybe that's the plan. I don't know if there is a plan or if people would really rather argue over BS than discuss something relevant. I mean, I guess the only thing that can be done to filter out this BS every time you go on and see discussions, titles about Dylan, maybe the titles of the videos should be named in a very vague way. So discussion time, or like how the Shack lady does it, gossip, Dylan Brown's gossip. You see that, you hear about it, and you think, oh, that could be very weak and very loose and not for definite and maybe a waste of time. But, if you're into that stuff or you just want to chat with people, hang out, whatever, then that's probably for you. So like that would work with Black Dove. Black Dove goes on, sees the Shack Lady stream, maybe join in, say hi, hi, how are you and stuff. But in terms of being disappointed by what's actually been talked about, that disappointment won't be there because the title explains the situation, right? As for me, at least, as I said, the videos where it's like a discussion and it's just called discussion, that's because it's just briefly talking, keeping the case alive. I mean, more in a third party style way. It's what, in those sort of videos, the discussion titled ones where it's very vague and brief, sometimes it's not always what the video reveals, but what the chat provides, the live chat, people coming on in, sharing information and other ideas and thoughts. So that's the way I see it. But I will start trying to do more direct videos, such as with the next one, okay? And you'll clearly see why it's more direct, because of the title, the length of the video, although it might be shorter, it's because it's looking at a singular thing or so, okay? But I said, with Black Dove saying there's limited information on the case, there's only so much you can talk about, right? So during all those times of for some people, not knowing what to say or what to bring up next, you just provide a platform to create a bit of noise, maybe a bit of encouragement to bring in people to share their thoughts and ideas. Although to some of the more harder hitting people that want the case to be solved and want direct action, they may think, well, these videos aren't helping, these live streams are a waste of time. If you want to be really realistic and straight to the point, they could arguably be a waste of time, but are they hurting, negatively impacting the case? Is it causing progression to go backwards? Yes, no. Maybe in some cases, if there is rumours turned into facts and events which causes confusion and may taint the presence of a person within the case or tied up and harm them negatively, or harm a location which suddenly has a bad reputation for no reason due to a rumour spreading. So yeah, it can backfire. Maybe people tampering with evidence, if that ever did happen, that can obviously negatively impact the case. But I'll just use me as an example because I can't really think of any other channels on the spot. With some of my videos, whilst they might not directly help solve the case, they're not causing any trouble. As long as they're not causing any trouble, then it doesn't really matter. It's not the end of the world, right? So I guess that's the other thing, the more die-hard people of the case need to understand, right? Anything else? What seemed relevant to me? The neighbour of Miss Lewson who saw Dylan leaving at night and returning in morning weeks before he disappeared. I mean, some of this stuff might be kind of can't say the word, tongue twister. Some of this stuff might imply repetition, but it's still important, because if someone like Black Dove shows repetition and alliteration, he's more consistent, and that's what you do want in a case like this, considering too many stories and wordings have changed so much. So in this case, it's a positive. So we'll read it anyway. So the neighbour of Miss Lewson who saw Dylan leaving at night and returning in the morning weeks before he disappeared. Okay, a bit more context behind that. Leaving at night and returning in the morning. Does that mean leaving from Montello? Oh no, it can't, because it says the neighbour of Miss Lewson. Wait, is Miss Lewson the name of the place or the name of the person without their name actually being mentioned due to privacy? Is it a woman in Lewson that saw Dylan leave at night to go to Montello? Which way round is that? The cops not wanting to walk to look at potential evidence because it was hot. John Lee Hornbeck's allegations from the social worker via Jim Terry. The fight between Kurt Brenner, Don Haley and Dylan that was brought up months ago on streams, which supposedly happened right before he disappeared. Supposedly right before he disappeared. Well, if that really was the case, then that could definitely be a motive, then the closer it is to one another. Because, like, in the past, when we heard about, like Don Haley being fired or parting ways on neutral terms in a way because of that falling out with Dylan and the washing machine, when we first heard about that, some of us were thinking, oh, that could be a motive for revenge. Don didn't want to be fired. Don didn't like what Dylan did to him, so he's going to get revenge on him. But because we found out that it was 6 weeks apart, 6 weeks between that and Dylan going missing, I don't think there was as much of a link as you'd think. Unless there's some long-term, some kind of like long-term grudge building, if you wanted to throw that in. Anything else? The people who lived by the sun tunnels who told Mike King they were sure Dylan was murdered out there. So the people that lived by the sun tunnels, what, they actually lived there on a day-to-day basis, or were they camping out there? If they were camping out there, are they the ones Candice Cooley referred to as witnesses when seeing Dylan the 27th late at night, 11:30 to 11:45 p.m. with the tractor? Or is this something completely different? Okay? And, if they're so sure that Dylan was murdered out there, they're sure, then they might know more than what you think. Also, the various wealthy or bankrupted ranchers who own property by Dylan's farm who allegedly had beef with him. And when they say beef, they don't mean producing beef and selling the food on, but they mean beef in terms of heated tension, arguments and disapprovals. Maybe. I mean, is it possible that any of those wealthy people out there who don't live out there but own the land, as described by Candice Cooley, did they see Dylan as a potential threat? Because Dylan could have took over the rest of the land down the line with his farming. Once again, was there a form of jealousy? People feeling that they're under threat because of Dylan and his young presence, but he's determined. Makes you think, right? Because how many young people are out there in Lucin or Montello moving out there to set up? Because how it's been worded by some, and I think on some articles, the likes of Montello at least is more of a retirement place where older people go to relax. That might not apply to everyone, but that's how it's been worded by some, right? So for Dylan, although it's Lucin, but it's nearby, for Dylan of his age to go out there just by himself, okay, maybe some of the older ones felt a little bit pissed off by it in some way. Also, Black Dove says, what happened to all of that, huh? Why has all of that been forgotten? Because if I was a YouTuber, I'd still be hammering on all those potential leads instead of fighting with people over petty BS. Just quick question towards Black Dove. Black Dove, those points you've mentioned, ever since the Shack Lady's return with her live streams, have you mentioned these points in brief to her? Yes, no? And how does she react? Because I can understand maybe on some channels you try to get your point across, you might be outspoken, people talk over you, or there's like back and forth drama, so you kind of like pushed back and so is your point. But if it's like a one-on-one, like how I've seen it with the Shack Lady, maybe not all the way through, but when I've seen her streams, it tends to be like talking to one person, and then maybe at some points throughout the live stream more people join in, but I've seen it as like one-on-one. So maybe the Shack Lady could listen, or have you already tried? I don't know, because that's why I'm asking you. Do we have any other comments to look at? Oh yeah, Pancake's birthday. What does Joseph say? Doesn't anybody remember Taylin and Kurt saying on Salty's panel, the trucks I've been washed? I assume they mean have been washed on Wednesday. The truck, Dylan's pickup truck. And then it changed to Friday. And then there are those early Chase Venstra recordings talking about hanging out with Dylan at his camper and how messy it was. Kurt posted those and was trying to implicate Chase long before anyone else did. It just didn't work. Why did Kurt and Taylina push these false narratives? Dylan and Chase obviously knew each other and had hung out prior. Well, from what I know of, at least, the 25th, that was the first time Dylan ever came across Chase Venstra. That's from what Candice Cooley said, because Dylan had a conversation with Candice before he went missing about the situation that happened. Yeah, he did lie about saying, he didn't pick Chase up. He avoided him, the crazy guy. But that was only to avoid being told off by the mother. But, really, end of the day, the only other person in the whole case you could actually listen to and maybe take word for word would be Dylan himself, but obviously because he's not here, it's not possible. Though, if you could track back to the last conversation Dylan had with someone, then you need to find that someone, right? So, there's a situation with Candice Cooley, situation with Chase Venstra, right? Well, depends if Dylan did speak to Chase Venstra or not about certain things, but if Dylan at least brought it up to Candice Cooley, then what Candice Cooley says should be a little bit more truthful in that specific area, because she's relaying what Dylan said. You know what I'm saying? A bit about coming across Chase for the first time ever. As for Chase Venstra's son, the son did work for Dylan, did 2 jobs for 2 days, and that was about it in the past. But Chase Venstra back then didn't know who Dylan was. Okay? So the 25th was the first time Dylan ever met Chase Venstra. So from the 25th to the 28th, what happened between those two? Were they separate, apart from one another, or did they meet up in between? What are your thoughts? Put aside all the rumours and all the dodgy information, we'll do a quick poll right now. Do you think between the 25th and the 28th, did Dylan ever meet back up with Chase Venstra in any way possible? What are your thoughts about that? Deb D says, I believe Taylene, Kurt, Don H, Jim Brenner, Chase Venstra, Robert, and even Ed Harshberger are involved and do know what happened to Dylan. Kind of weird how most of these guys left town or we'll hear nothing from them anymore. Remember how Taylene used to have a lot to say, now nothing at all. I mean, yeah, it's a little bit odd how these people are suddenly moving out left, right, and centre. And, okay, if they moved out right at the beginning, it would have seemed even more suspicious and more likely they're responsible. But maybe they didn't want to move out too soon, because if they did, then it would obviously make them look more suspicious. So, let the dust settle with time. What does Mini-Me say? That's where you are wrong. They have said over and over again, how many more times do they have to keep repeating to you all? You don't believe Kurt and Tay anyways, so why should they keep coming on YouTube to tell you the same story to have you all call them liars? But weren't those people supposedly paid to call in and be interviewed? Why was it not done naturally? Mini-Me says, doesn't make sense what you're asking of them. As for Tay, she's around, she has been. If you didn't just focus on one creator, you would know who she is. Then again, you would be rude probably, because most here have their minds made up on who's involved and who did it, when the authorities don't even know, or they would have arrested people for murder and accomplices by now. If they had a strong case and strong evidence, even without Dylan's body, trust and believe an arrest would have been made. I'm not saying they don't have some good evidence, but maybe it's not enough to correctly arrest the murderer and ones that may be involved, is all I'm saying. Everyone wants to keep saying Kurt this and Brenner that. We may just find out on the end it's a totally different story. We really never know, just saying, but it does look like Brenner played a role of some kind. I mean, all I'll say is, let's say Kurt Wadsworth is responsible, but all these people keep hounding him and calling him out, calling him a liar. But this is the thing, he doesn't do himself any favours. If Kurt Wadsworth did a polygraph test, considering everyone else did, and he passed it, then that's good. If Kurt Wadsworth did interviews without being drunk all the time, and was a little bit more consistent and not switching and changing, then that would be a positive as well, right? So in the eyes of someone like me, who's questioned Candice Cooley, considering Candice Cooley has switched and changed with information at times and has appeared very confident in what she says, but then it's proven wrong at a later point, right? Kurt Wadsworth has done similar things, so that's why I'm suspicious of him or question him to an extent, right? And I believe that's what other people do too, okay? So the more you act dodgy, whether it's intentional or not, the more you will be questioned and focused on, right? Just like how with Brenner, just because he's in the location of where Dylan supposedly went missing, not many other people around, it makes him the main focal point of possible suspicion and questioning. Whilst he couldn't control that due to the location part, it followed. Whereas in this case, with someone like Kurt, action can be taken to avoid being seen as suspicious, but he's chosen not to do that. You get what I'm saying? So, somehow, somewhere he could be innocent, but he's not doing himself favours, the way he's responded at times, the way he's appeared, okay? That's all I'm saying. Hey, Rafi. Okay. Shout out to Christy. Hey, all dodgy chatters. How many dodgy chatters are in the chat tonight? Let's do a little count. Battle Rog. I'd like to hear your theory on Kenny Veach and Dylan Rounds. Warlike Ralph, after all these videos, you've got to have a bit more than just an educated guess. It doesn't matter if it's accurate or not. If we ever learn the truth in both cases, I'm just keen for you to lay it all out on the table, unbiased and unhindered. You seem like a confident, stable enough a feller to do so. I'll be waiting, mate. So we went from a bit of an Irish one there to Australian. Interesting. Hey, Tower in the morning, you're a bit of a stable feller, aren't you, mate? Right on, mate. Fucking Andrew Culver level. Okay. Well, we can, as I said, I can share my opinion of both Dylan and Kenny Veach very shortly, just after this. Okay. We got Wendy. Who's Wendy? I think Wendy's a new viewer. What's it? Wendy Dunbar. Wendy Crowbar? Oh, God. Do you know Ted Bundy? Anyway. Wendy says, does anyone remember Chase going into the bar asking bartender about where Dylan's farm is? Whoever was bartending that day should be ashamed of themselves. I would have never given an address away without the person's permission first. Where I grew up, we looked after one another. For a small town, it seemed opposite. Okay. I mean, like, if you're a business guy or something, or you needed to deliver some resources or deliver something to someone, you might need to ask nearby for directions, and I think they tend to be given. Maybe a little bit of questioning could have taken place, but is this a rumour once again? I mean, all I would say is, if this really was the case, and I mean if it really was the case, then that bartender should probably be interviewed, or have they already been? What did they say? But right, it's not a rumour, okay? Okay, so that's about it. Did we check that reply? Theory is he's alive, well, living somewhere else. He went missing. They should have been watching the brother's house. I believe it was well planned by Kenny brother. He's escaped from what he owed. Okay. Right, so let's move on to my opinions now. One thing I've also just realised, because of obviously the title of this video and giving my opinion on Kenny Veach, I can imagine some of the Kenny Veach viewers complaining, whinging and whining beforehand earlier in this video saying, where are you going to talk about Kenny Veach? When is it going to happen? When is it going to happen? When is it going to happen? It's like, oh my God, we're still 10 miles away from the nearest McDonald's. Fucking sit back in your seat and wait, man. My God. It'll probably be one of those situations, just a little prediction on the spot. But now, first of all, let me give my opinion on the situation with Kenny Veach, and then I'll follow it up with my opinion on Dylan Rounds, okay? So, this can also be aimed towards that Battle Rog guy, or whatever his name is. Providing you have actually watched my videos and coverage of the Kenny Veach case, over 250 videos on the case, right? New developments with time and key events taking place, such as the 2018 CCTV footage break-in at the Reiki Healing Store, having Enchanted Forest, okay, in which the likes of the brother, Raymond Veach, has worked at and done classes, okay? And I think Sharon Pilgrim as well, present there, okay? But what I'm saying is, with the footage which was shown, okay, which depicted a person that looked like Kenny Veach, that highlighted the possibility that Kenny Veach was in fact alive, at least in 2018. So the 2014 disappearance, he was elsewhere, underground, in between, okay? And whilst with time it's been contested, the CCTV footage, whether it be measuring the face, the angles, the width, and it been proven, disproven by that the person in the shot isn't Kenny Veach. The positive is that in recent time, I guess you can call it recent time, followed with a new updated video which provided potential proof Kenny Veach is, or at least was, alive at the end of 2022 in November, just before his birthday, when he made a phone call from his account on the Facebook Messenger to Susan Veach, the sister-in-law. Why? Who knows? Was it a missed call? Unfortunately it was. So maybe if you answered the call you might have received something, but you know, you can't like be prepared for it because you have no clue it's going to happen, right? It's just unfortunate. But it does provide another backstory to suggest that he is alive, right? Because this sort of stuff doesn't happen that often, right? So it must be for an important reason, okay? Sometimes the most important things happen in small amounts and it's not all the time. That's what makes it special. That's what makes it impactful for both good and bad reasons in life, right? And I think when you look back as well in the past with the possibilities and outcomes, side factors, background stuff, and the way it was laid out with the hike itself, things left here, things left there, the scent being lost at the mine shaft and the mine shaft being cleared of any possible people within. It makes you think he just turned back round, walked all the way back and got picked up by someone else. By leaving his equipment, his vehicle out there, it was like proof of him going out there and staying out there, but getting picked up by someone else to be able to move on with his life and start a fresh life. That's the way I see it, okay? He was struggling with money, so maybe he needed to try and get away, break away from that thing that like was imprisoning him, okay? Is it the end of the world? Not really, but if it's being portrayed as he's missing when he's truly not, that's a bit problematic because you will get people going out there searching, looking for Kenny, especially, you know, in the Mojave Desert where it's rough, rugged and dangerous. You can get hurt, you could go missing yourself possibly. And if there's no caution, there's no warnings provided saying, just be aware that Kenny may not be out there and he's faking his disappearance. If that's not said, people are going to be wasting their time, money, effort and own possible life and safety. Okay, whilst you can still go out there, of course, looking for the M cave, right? The mystery of that, just like how Jeff Clark did. Yeah, there's always still a part 2 within this whole case, right? Looking for the mysterious cave, wherever that may be. Do I believe it exists? I think there's a possibility. Although the M cave has not been found, but M-shaped caves have been found, there's still a chance. And because some M-shaped caves have been found by a singular individual and not been spotted since, it goes to show that there are probably hidden ones out there, or in a weird angle, or higher above, or much lower down. There's still possibilities, okay? But what I will say is, if it turned out that Kenny Veach faked his disappearance, he likely faked the M cave, okay? Whether it be purely direct or slightly indirect. And I can do maybe a singular video on that sometime, okay? I want to do a poll right now, just as a heads up for the future. It's more of a discussion one, but it's kind of a deep one. I can still remember it in my head, so that's not a problem in terms of what I've learned and seen. But originally I wanted to depict it and tell it more as a visual story. But because of copyright claims, as we've seen in recent time, I don't want to spend 12 hours editing something for it to be unusable. That's just completely a waste of time. So are you okay with a Kenny Veach video being made sometime in the future, which looks at a key deep theory, but it's just told like how I'm talking right now without all the fancy visual edits, because I don't want to risk copyright claims again, because it's happened too often, okay? And if people have gay obsessions and grudges with me in between, they'll probably try and follow it up in some way, okay? So make sure to vote right now, and then I'll know what to do in the future, okay, whether it should be done or not. And yeah, so to put it even more briefer, in my opinion, I feel Kenny Veach has faked his death, but the mystery of the M Cave is still up for debate and still out there to maybe explore and search. But there is a chance that if Kenny has lied about one thing, he may have lied about another, or at least exaggerated it, such as the vibrations of the cave, okay? So yeah, hopefully that clears that up in terms of opinions. And obviously with this kind of recent proof, and maybe there might be more proof down the line which highlights the idea that Kenny is still out there, still alive. You know, from a 2018 to a 2022 point of activity, shows that there's something going on at least, which is kind of a positive. Now, as for Dylan Rounds, do I believe he's no longer alive? I believe he's dead, okay? And because of the way the case has gone and the way that Ellie have handled it in a way, treated as a homicide, then yeah, a murder case, that's why it's true crime, okay? It's a missing person, just a simple missing person case is different to true crime. A true crime case can result in a death of someone or several people. It's kind of a mystery, trying to figure out who's responsible, true crime. But then you can also have people that have gone missing and then presumed dead, and someone's responsible, and that's seen as true crime, okay? So it can be a singular victim or multiple, like with the Idaho 4 one, okay? So yeah, I think Dylan was killed from the phone pings and all that in between, and me arranging it, how I've done my countless map analysis. I would say, yeah, it probably took place at the grain shed and within the grain shed, hence why there was some kind of biological matter, possible vomit found on the ground of some sort. At that point, what do I think happened? That he was taken somewhere to be disposed of? Possibly. I can't go any deeper than that, because with the land being so open and vast, you can say there's a lot of opportunities, and you can also say there isn't many. But it depends how far out you're willing to go. If you cover a lot of distance, you've got a lot of opportunities. If you're doing it nearby, best bet is dig somewhere in the ground. Due to the fact that it's so vast and open and there's a lot of distance to cover, picking that exact spot, you know, you have the choice. People that have to come along and try and find that spot without a map or clues is quite difficult. I know equipment can help, but as described by Candice Cooley recently, like that full spectral drone, it's limited, so kind of disappointing to hear, but that seems to be the case, right? The other part I need to give my opinion on, do I believe that Brenner is the only one responsible? I would say it feels like Brenner is the only one physically responsible for taking out Dylan, but I feel there's a possibility that there's others maybe present or came in afterwards to assist, maybe in the disposal of Dylan, okay? I mean, if you think different, you can share your thoughts down below, but I'm just giving my opinion, okay? Do I think lots and lots of people were involved? No, I'd probably say 2 to 3 other individuals, and I have said that since the beginning, okay? So yeah, that's just my opinion, okay? It's kind of like brief, but I'm just giving a brief, short opinion based off from what I know of, or at least feel is somewhat concrete to listened to, okay? It's a positive in a way. A short opinion like that, despite over hundreds and 200 hours worths of BS and rumours all over the place, it's kind of like a small sign that it didn't get to my head. It didn't negatively confuse me or make me go lost in thought. So that's a positive in a way, okay? So I think what I need to also highlight right now, and not that it did happen, but if it did, then it would have been a different playing ground, right? If that 2021 event that occurred with Brenner attacking someone with the lawn chair that's 9-year-old or 70-year-old, right, back then, if it never happened, or if the police never followed up on it, specifically more so with the Don Hately and that gun charge, if that gun charge never happened, then the catalyst probably wouldn't have existed, speeding up that 2021 outstanding warrant, if you call it that, okay? So technically, put that gun charge like it never happened, Brenner could possibly still be walking free. And if he was, would that have hindered any searches or investigations? Because, you know, whilst Candice Cooley, the crew and whoever's been out there, whether it be just for the camera or day to day, they would have been near the grain shed on that land and out and about elsewhere. As Candice Cooley has said, Brenner doesn't like people being on the land or being around, and that's why the search and rescue in the early days had to move away and go down to, I guess, the pond and area of Dylan's farm and stuff, because they didn't want to piss him off. So it'd have been a little bit submissive, right? So what I'm thinking is, would it have made the search any more difficult when looking for Dylan if Brenner was just sitting about? Would it have caused any unnecessary drama, tension? Would it have backfired? Yeah, I'm not too sure. And as well, do you think people could have taken matters into their own hands, trying to kidnap Brenner or trying to interview him in some way? Possibly. And maybe Pancakes might have tried, but could that have backfired and maybe more people might have got hurt in the process? A lot of stuff that didn't happen but could have, right? It's always interesting looking at that, because it's not like it causes confusion. It could be seen as not that helpful, but it's just more out of interest and intrigue, and you would have seen that pattern by me quite often, or at least what could happen in the future. So I feel like if Brenner was never arrested, right, obviously it would have given him even more time to maybe dispose of Dylan or remove him. But I think what it may have also done is cause more anger, frustration towards the family. Might have led to Justin at one point losing it, or someone else, and then taking it out on Brenner. Brenner being maybe hurt, and then no justice because Brenner might not be alive anymore. Because as we saw in one of the previous videos I did with the poll, majority of people that voted said that Brenner being locked up for the rest of his life is more justice than him receiving the death penalty. Because the death penalty is like a quick death like that, over and done with. Whereas being in prison, it's dragged out and it's more maybe stressful in a way, longer term, and not as fun. So yeah. Could it have ever happened where Brenner may have confessed if he was still out and about walking free? No, but I feel like he might have spread a lot more lies and rumours, and he might have started giving directions for maybe people to go out and about and look, and it turned out to be false claims. The only other possibility I could think of is if there was people nearby in the area searching, whether it be Lance Kelly at one point, or if it be Ty Corbin at some point, or maybe Pancakes went down himself, and you were on the land nearby and you got Brenner, depending what mood he's in, and you know he's been known to fire warning shots, maybe if you get too close, or maybe if you do go in the right direction, maybe he could kill you as well to silence you. Like, that's probably the only positive with Brenner being locked up where he's at right now. Although he's not been truly sent down, he's not going anywhere. So if anyone is in the right spot, it's not like they're going to get silenced by Brenner because Brenner can't do anything, okay? You know, that's like another possibility. I'm just trying to think, really. If people believe that there are others out there responsible, I guess the only other way to find that out is by seeing if there's levels of resistance towards certain material or actions, right? So like how we said, if you're on the right track, you receive resistance, you try to get silenced, you try to get shut down, all negative stuff happens to you, right? What about in real life, if you're actually in the area? So even though they don't like to associate themselves with one another anymore, put aside all the stuff that went on behind the scenes and all the falling outs. When Lance Kelly and Ty Corbin in the early days only were on good terms, when they said they received threats from people, shouldn't that be looked at closer? If you're receiving threats, it must be from people that don't want you finding Dylan. Or it might be from people who are directly responsible, who feel you're on the right path and you're nearby. And whilst it's important as a sign online to say you must be on the right track to what you're covering, it's even more critical and even more important if it's actually in real life and it's footage which receives resistance. If one day you upload a video of you in a field, in a different field to where you were previous, and now you're suddenly receiving resistance, it's like, oh, should I not be here? Is there something somewhere around here which is causing that reaction and they're getting triggered? Must be. You think about it, the reason why Jim Twat and Mr. Impetuous have got resistant at times is because they can't get what they want, right? Maybe it's through teasing indirect. Maybe it's through certain wording, certain language, certain videos, and it's kind of grinding at them. They just want to come. Not in that way. They want to appear on the show in some way to get their point across or to clear things up or to kidnap me and bring me over to the dark side, right? There's a reason, there's a motive behind it. And with each video that's released, which doesn't include them, there's a level of frustration, a level of resistance, and that's what we've seen in recent time. There's a reason behind it, right? So you can apply it to the Dylan Rounds case, more so physically. You're out there, you're in a certain area, you're actually documenting it, recording it. You might even get too close to a certain spot and say, oh, that looks a bit interesting down there. Oh, that looks like a bone. That looks like a bit of cloth. And then suddenly, you see in the comment section afterwards, negativity, quite serious, or even more personal, you get a private email. And it's like, oh shit, did we just step onto it? So even though Ty Corbin no longer associates with Lance Kelly, all I'll say is, whatever they were both doing back then, could they have been on the right track to receive that threats? Because you don't just receive threats on a normal day-to-day basis, right? There's a reason behind it. So I think that needs to be looked at. Just like how Black Dove said, you need to look back at things, I think, in terms of threats and warnings need to be analysed. Within the Kenny Veach case, there was a lot of that there, and I documented it along the way, and people said, why are you doing it? What's the point? Because it must reveal something. There's a reason behind why people are doing what they're doing. I feel it's not been documented the same way within the Dylan Rounds case. You know what I'm saying? I've documented resistance, but it wasn't the serious level as what's seen in the Kenny Veach case, and probably not to the extent as experienced by Ty Corbin and the threats he's received in the early days. You get what I'm saying? The resistance, what I've come across was more messing about, degenerative behaviour, you know, that type of stuff. So it wasn't as telling. Though maybe in more recent time with videos receiving copyright claims and videos being delayed and coverage, you could say there's something behind that at least. But I just think there might be more to it. So whilst it's important to try and find Dylan's remains, and it's also important to find other possible suspects out there, to be able to reveal one thing which then reveals another, you might need to go back to the beginning of the resistance. Who was it from? What was the catalyst that triggered it, that caused it? Where, when, how, why? Is that possible? If there's anyone in chat that has witnessed resistance, witnessed threats or direct threats, list it down below if you're able to, if you want to, and see what happens, right? Because I think there could be a bit more to it. If there are no threats whatsoever, absolutely no threats whatsoever, then you could say Brenner's the only guilty one, right? But because there is tension out there, although people are keeping quiet, they're keeping quiet to an extent, maybe so they don't appear completely suspicious. They might be using alternative accounts. They might be doing things behind the scenes to prevent people from getting any closer, to deter people. They do it in the shadows so they don't get caught or seen. You never know, right? We'll leave it there. Let's now move on to the Dylan Rounds Facebook forum and see what this post was, which Candice Cooley responded to. Okay, so here we are. This is by Max Sweet and posted 2nd of February, so kind of recent. And Max says, random question that I don't think I found an answer to on the pinned post. Apart from Heavy D, who doubled the reward, are there any YouTubers who are working on searches with the family? I only asked because I had a thought last week, brought it up to a friend who lives in the next state over, in brackets as I'm in the UK, to see if she knew anyone close who could just have a quick look at somewhere I can't quite get off my mind. And she has said that she has reached out to, I won't say the name in case it's not allowed, a YouTube channel that have worked with his parents on daily searches. I guess I'm just concerned that if the place does throw any clues up that it may not be disclosed in a moral way or whatnot. Chances are it's nothing, but just out of curiosity, I figured I'd ask in here in case there are some known YouTubers to not give tips or suggestions to. As always, sending my love. Okay. Let's see what Candice Cooley responds with. Get that off. Candice Cooley says, there is absolutely no YouTube group that has been out there looking for Dylan. There are many that have claimed to be out there, but all they are using is our son's name to make money. Donna says, I'm sorry, there are such disgusting people in this world. If I ever see any saying they have helped, I'll call them out. Brienne says, that is cold and heartless. Wish they lived close enough to shut them up. Max says, I'm so sorry to hear this. I kind of had an inkling it was the case with the terms about what I'd say to her. I'm the other side of the ocean, so she said would give an anonymous tip to the police. What? She said would give anonymous tip to the police, but then said from what she had seen, she didn't trust them to take it seriously anyway. And they may be right in not taking or seriously as it's only a hunch. What, some kind of rumour? What's this all about? Come on. Sorry if this comes off as abrasive, I don't mean it to, but what has that got to do with the unreliable and lying YouTubers? Or do you mean that they are spreading false information by saying they are working with Candice like that happened to you? The only reason I shared my hunch with my friend on a place to check out was because I didn't want to go straight to Candice with what could be seen as mumbo jumbo. Didn't Heavy D check out a couple of mines? I know he did for Susan. Yaz Gulson says, does your comment have anything to do with the disappearance of Dylan Rounds? What's this got to do with Brienne? This is cold and heartless. Wish they lived close enough to shut them up. Okay, so we're getting a little bit of bitchy behaviour back and forth here. So it just goes to show, it happens all over. John Smythe says, Candice Cooley, are we any closer to finding Dylan than, say, 6 or 7 months ago? Do we have a target area from evidence found? Candice Cooley says, and there are absolutely no YouTube groups that Justin and I have worked with on any searches, nor will we ever. What? Wait, hold on. This doesn't make sense. Kaylin says, did the Diesel brothers not come fly around looking and such, or was that all YouTube video creating content? Candice Cooley says, yes, they did. They're much more than a YouTube group. Okay, so it's Candice Cooley with a dodgy terms and wording. I just wasn't sure if they were put into the category by your statement or not. That's why I asked. Okay. Jason says, there is a YouTube video of what I assume is you talking with Dave Sparks in the beginning. Is that not a legit video? I'm 100% not trying to start anything, just seeking a little clarification. Yaz Gilson says, yes, Heavy D was involved the first few days after Dylan went missing. I think Candice considers him a TV personality, not a YouTuber. What? So a TV personality is better than a YouTuber, not as dodgy when it comes to a case like this. What? You know, at the end of the day, a TV personality can be just as dodgy and corrupt as a YouTuber, right? It can go hand in hand. Both equal an audience, both equal certain targets and possible money made if in a certain situation, right? And if popular, so there are crossovers. Terry says, I believe there are some YouTubers that are just promoting themselves through Dylan's name. The only way to know if legit or not is through Candice herself. Yes, there have been legit vlogs with interviews and some well-known people using equipment to search, which has been very useful, but Candice will let us know if and when they're happening. I think if you have just joined the group, it can be confusing for some, but best to read the previous post, then you'll know for sure. So from the looks of it, it seems to be a little bit cutthroat that basically, if you're not in contact with Candice Cooley, then you're not allowed to cover the case whatsoever. That's how it seems to imply at times. But really, as long as you're not causing harm to the case, then you should be allowed to cover it. As a one-off or a couple of videos maybe. What's this? I've been loosely following. I'm a fan of Dave and his generosity. What's this? Danny Ann says, I have not looked for updates in a while and I went to No Thanks channel. The creator was supposed to be talking about Dylan and then was ranting and threatening really extreme violence. But it was hard to follow who he was talking about. It was extremely alarming. Definitely want to be supportive of the family and will patiently check this page for future updates. Is that true about No Thanks? I know someone in the chat recently said Doug acted out a little bit, but was that really the case? Doug was being extremely violent and ranting and threatening. Did that really happen? I've not really seen his videos since, so I'm not too sure. Is the video still up on the channel? Was it misinterpreted, misunderstood? Was the video deleted, like how Doug supposedly has done previously, as described by a viewer on my channel? I don't know. Interesting. Because that really is the case. Whilst Candice Cooley is calling out these YouTubers left, right and centre for not helping and being, you know, dodgy and stuff, I mean, you may be associating yourself with one of those YouTubers. You never know. Krista B. Oh, a B. No dogs, hopefully. And don't even get me started on the PI who shall not be named, who literally built his entire channel from the ground up using the family's name. These people are vultures. It's horrible. This isn't a game. It's a reason I asked someone closer than me in the UK if they could check somewhere. They're suffering enough. Oh, I try not to lose faith in humanity, but there are plenty of people out there trying to give humans a bad name. Well, debatable. Tracy. Chris from Mob Crew, along with his cousin, has put many countless hours out there in studio and behind the scenes with only goal to help bring Dylan home. That's true. And you can't say Mob Crew Chris is a TV personality as excused and described by Candice Cooley in relation to Heavy D and his crew, whilst Heavy D technically and his channel and the whole purpose of it and the video format and it being uploaded to YouTube, he is a YouTuber, aside from TV personality. So whilst Candice Cooley calls out all these YouTubers, all these people in the case in a negative way, technically she's throwing Mob Crew Chris under the bus, because he's a YouTuber, and technically Heavy D. But then Candice Cooley is backtracking on herself and rewording things. Oh, well, I didn't quite mean that. Well, yeah, he's a YouTuber, but I see him more as a TV personality star. What does she say there about Mob Crew Chris? Yaz Gilson says, to be fair, the searches were stopped not to impede the investigation when the FBI became involved. And your point is? Candice Cooley responds back saying, Chris came out with us. He has never asked for money to help look for Dylan, and he has never used Dylan's case for profit. He came out at his own expense to help. Yeah, that may well be the case, but the way Candice Cooley worded her response in the beginning, it seemed as if she was calling out Mob Crew Chris as well. So I think this is the problem. It's just the way Candice Cooley words things at times. It makes you question. You know what I'm saying? We can try and refer back to it in a second. Dallas says, contact Box Elder County Sheriff if you have any information to provide. Okay. Betty Sprague Robertson said, adventures with purpose. I guess, what does that mean? Candice Cooley saying, there's no water or missing vehicle. Okay, fair enough. And Candice Cooley says, we will be shutting off commenting on this. This subject has been extensively covered and the family's focus is not YouTube. The family's focus is not YouTube, yet Candice Cooley, a part of the family, relied and reached out to the likes of YouTubers for a platform in order for her to get her voice across and to not be the voiceless anymore. And she has been thankful of that. She's shown acknowledgement to Mob Crew Chris and Heavy D and his crew for that reward money, and on top of piloting the drone, and on top of Doug No Thanks for at least interviewing her and letting her speak freely and openly on YouTube. So I would say that some of the family, such as Candice Cooley, has focused on YouTube as a way of spreading awareness. And once again, what we're seeing now is it's like, oh, we have no purpose, we have no affiliation with YouTubers, with this, with that anymore. We have no affiliation with the platform YouTube. No, we never did. And it's like, but you did at one point. Don't forget that. Just like how in the early days of the case, when it was all about, get the police in, try and solve it, no hope at some point. Right, we need the general public. Come on, general public, come on in. Help if you can. Volunteers, it's all appreciated. Oh, wait. We've got to a point now where we don't want it to impede. So we don't want anyone here. Back off now. Get away. Let the police focus. It's that sudden snap, not in aggression, but disassociation with people, detachment. That's what Candice Cooley is kind of demonstrating. That's kind of interesting, I'd say. Wow. Let's just double check her original response, how she worded it. Whereabout is it now? There is absolutely no YouTube group that has been out there looking for Dylan. There are many that have claimed to be out there, but they're all using the son's name to make money. That's really poor wording by Candice Cooley. Candice directly said no YouTube group whatsoever has been looking for Dylan. And yet Mob Crew Chris is a YouTuber, has a channel, and he's brought people out with him, like the cousin, a little group going out there. So technically, if you just read this sentence by Candice Cooley is saying that Mob Crew Chris hasn't been looking for Dylan, that Heavy D hasn't been looking for Dylan, that maybe Arizona Traveller hasn't been looking for Dylan, and everyone else in between. And yet you scroll down here, Candice Cooley says, yes, but Heavy D, yes, they did, but they're not much more. They're a TV personality. Yeah, there you go. Yes, Heavy D was involved the first few days after Dylan went missing. I think Candice considers him a TV personality, not a YouTuber. Speaking on behalf of her. Wow. And this bit here where it says, well, Chris came out with us. He never asked for money to help look for Dylan, and he's never used Dylan's case for profit. Yeah, that's all positive. Yeah, that is positive. You can acknowledge that. Chris has done well. But that's not how it reads at the beginning, where you said no YouTube group has gone out there searching or trying to help. They've all been doing it to make money. And then you say, well, Chris, he's with us. He came out with us. He's assisted with us. What about Doug? You've not mentioned Doug. No one's mentioned Doug on here. You're still in contact with him. You're still doing the interviews. So this is very, very poor wording and could also be interpreted as possible biasness Candice Cooley is demonstrating. This is quite messy. This is not the first time, okay? This definitely needs to be highlighted, okay? Make sure in the chat or down the line to refer back to this, whether you be in a different video, different chat, different comment section, different forum, wherever you may be. Just highlight this point because we're just seeing yet more slightly dodgy behaviour going on. with how Candice Cooley detaches from people, groups, maybe associations. 1 minute requires help from them, next minute doesn't want to affiliate with them. Sometimes it's down to poor wording and a misunderstanding, and then other times it's like, well, what about that person you're associating yourself with, and then not now but now are. Whoa, what the hell's going on? I hope people can pick up on this, okay? And we'll just do it one more time, just so you know, because I don't want anyone confused. This person's asking, has there been any other groups out there searching, helping, assisting with the family specifically? Not like Ty, not like Lance, who've done it independently. And Candice Cooley is like, absolutely no. No YouTube group has been out there looking for Dylan. Then people brought up saying, well, what about Heavy D and the crew there? You know, what about them? Candice is like, and there are absolutely no YouTube groups that Justin and I have worked with on any searches, nor will we ever. And yet, Candice Cooley worked with Texas Equisearch, has worked with Mob Crew Chris from YouTube. So either you've not worked with anyone at all, nor will you ever, or you have, but you don't want to include their names in this. That is weird. The text doesn't lie. That's by Candice Cooley. That's what she says. That's what she thinks. Wow. Okay, so I think we'll end the video there. Make sure to start and continue more discussions after this video has ended, especially about that part with Candice Cooley. You know, I wasn't expecting those replies and responses. Definitely not thought out when typing it up, was it? Poor choice of wording in a way, disassociating from others. That is not exactly good, okay? So, wow. I said there was going to be, I wouldn't say this is it, but I was saying that there would be twists and turns within the case, and we're still seeing it now. As we get certain levels of stability, whether it be trust, hope in something or someone, it derails very quickly at a certain point in time, doesn't it? What are your thoughts on that with what Candice Cooley said? Do you agree? Is she right in what she says, or is she being a bit hypocritical? What else can be said? You can share your thoughts and opinions down below and continue the discussions. I guess we'll see what happens next, if there is anything. And yeah, I guess that's it for now. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Goodbye and good night for now.